Huh? Sweet. I love it. All right, yeah, there's just something about the music that, I mean, our band is good, but there's just something about adding that one rhythm component that just takes it up a notch. So we appreciate that. All right, we are talking about what? Yeah, that's Sunday morning. Sunday. Yeah, they keep me busy. I think right.
He was listening.
That's good. So on Sunday nights, we have been doing nouns. And a noun is a person, place, or thing. So let's see. We have talked about some things. Anybody remember some things that we've talked about? Mount Moriah. We covered not Mariah Carey, Mount Moriah. A far better Mariah. That was tough, man. Yeah, you woke up for nothing? Got up at the crack of dinner so he could, yeah, okay. All right, what else did we do? We did Mount Moriah, we did?
The river.
Mount Moriah is a place. That is correct. Which is a noun. We're starting to connect the dots here. Boy, we're shaking those cobwebs loose right before you start back to school, right? So let's see. And then we talked about the Jordan River, which is a...
Thing in a place.
It's a thing that runs through a place or many places. I would go with a thing. You can feel free to correct me. So we did that. Now we actually want to shift gears and we're going to talk about a person. Since we have talked about a place and we've talked about a thing, we thought we'd try a person. And so we want to talk about a guy named Elijah. And we find his story in 1 Kings chapter 17. And actually we're going to find it there all the way through the beginning of 2 Kings. So we're going to talk about Elijah for a little while. So if somebody wants to find it, we don't have it on the projector. So somebody needs to, there's the darker blue books in front of you are Bibles. And I feel like, gentlemen, this is a Bible. Yeah. So 1 Kings 17. So when you get a page number, let me know because I was lazy and didn't look it up. 193. So 1 Kings 17. So we're going to talk about Elijah. Now we're going to do something a little bit differently. I know that for the last several months, Pastor Carl and I have been kind of talking about the same noun at the same time. And I decided that was a little chaotic. And so I decided for us, that I would talk about my noun and he could pick his own noun and he could talk about that. And so now the onus is on you to keep track of which one you're getting. How's that sound? So we just like to really be confusing whenever possible. So 1 Kings chapter 17, we run into this guy named Elijah. Now, before we can really let Elijah onto the stage, we need to set the stage a little bit. And when he takes the stage, it'll be one of those emerald moments, just like, bam, he's there, we'll know it. But we need to back up to understand the context in which he lived, in which he ministered, and get an idea of, kind of the environment that he was walking into. So in order to set the stage a little bit, we actually need to back up a couple verses into 1 Kings chapter 16. So hopefully that's near 17. Is it? 192. Okay. So backing way up page. All right, so we're going to go into verse 29. 1 Kings 16, we're going to begin reading in verse 29. Oh, it's still on 193. I stand corrected. You sit corrected. All right, so we're still in the same place. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri became king over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. Now Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. That's pretty impressive, but we're not done yet. And it came to pass as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took as wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. And he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a wooden image, and note again, Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Now, a little historical context, Israel was only one country for a couple kings. Israel was a united country under Saul, and then under David, and then under Solomon. And after Solomon, Solomon's son was not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, and he decided that Solomon had taxed the people a lot, and he was going to tax them even more because he was a spoiled rich brat and he wanted more money. And that's literally what it was boiled down to. And so he decided he was going to tax the people more, and 10 tribes, the nation of Israel was broken up into 12 different tribes. 10 of those tribes said, see ya, we're not interested in a tax increase. We're going to go form our own country. You do whatever sounds good to you. And they did. The 10 tribes took off and they went north, and they actually retained the name of Israel. 2 tribes, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, stayed, and there were the southern 2 tribes. They stayed together. They took on the name of Judah, and they took on the son of Solomon to be their tax-heavy king. And so that gives you kind of an idea. So you've got 10 nations that are Israel. There are 10 tribes that are Israel, 2 tribes that are Judah. Now, the nation of Israel, the northern 10 tribes, had absolutely 0 good kings. None. No good ones. Judah had a couple. But for a period of about 300 years, every king who ruled over Israel was wicked. And so as we look at this guy named Ahab, and we find out that Ahab was the most wicked king that Israel had known, that's saying something. Because they had all been pretty wicked. This guy went out of his way to offend God. And so he decided that he was going to get married. And so he goes up to Sidon, which is another country north of Israel, and he takes this woman Jezebel to be his wife. Now, this particular marriage was a political marriage. It was an economic marriage. It was a marriage designed to bring these 2 nations together. And so from an economic perspective, it reopened trade between Sidon and Israel, and that was good for both countries, probably better for Sidon. And as a political marriage, it really offered political aid for both countries, because off to the east of Israel was a nation, a country known as Assyria. And Assyria was becoming increasingly powerful. And the Assyrians were barbaric, and they were out to rule the world. And this was like no Despicable Me moment. They were serious. And so they were out to rule the world, and all the smaller nations were beginning to align themselves together to try to resist the Assyrians, which worked for a while, but not for very long. And so you have this kind of match made up here. Now, Ahab, we're told, built a temple for Baal. Now, Ahab was the king of what? Israel. Who's the God of Israel? God, right, for lack of a better term. God. And so here's Ahab, the king of Israel, and he's off building a temple for Baal. Is Baal the king, the God of Israel? No. So red flags are going up already, right? Here you got a guy, he's building a temple for a God that's not his God or shouldn't be his God, but it is his wife's God. So gentlemen, this is an object lesson in what not to do. And so he's out there and he builds a temple to Baal, and he builds an altar to Baal, and then he goes with his wife to worship at her church. Problem, ding, 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 problem, all over the place. But here's the thing. He knew when he married Jezebel that Jezebel worshipped Baal. And many of the kings of Israel had wives that were into other gods, and a lot of them built temples for them. Solomon did it. And so this was not exactly a new practice. But Jezebel wasn't content to worship Baal privately, as if having your own temple is a private affair. But she wasn't content to just worship Baal herself and with her entourage. Her goal was actually to go out and to convert Israel to Baal worship, to take them away from worshiping the one true God and to begin worshiping Baal. And so the fact that Ahab built this temple and built this altar and then went to temple with her went a long way at advancing her agenda of taking the people of Israel away from the one true God and to Baal. And so we find this wicked gang. And when you're bad enough that in the space of 4 or 5 verses that God says twice in 2 different sentences, this is the most wicked guy on the planet at this time, usually means he means business. I mean, this is not what you want on your tombstone. And he was the wickedest dude ever. In New England, I understand wicked means something a little different. He was wicked. Okay, now you understand that, right? He was wicked. No place else in the nation does that even make sense. But here in New England, we like it. So, so we have this going on. Now, it also helps to understand a little bit about Baal. So Baal was actually a Phoenician god, and Baal was a storm god. And storm gods do what? Nothing, because they don't exist. But in theory, a storm god would be the god who brings storms, who brings rain, which, if you're in an agricultural community, is rain an important thing? Yeah, just kind of. And especially if you're in an arid climate like Israel, where it's naturally and normally dry, is rain very important? Oh yeah, you better believe it. And so Baal was somebody who immediately was, acceptable to the Israelites because, it's kind of like cover all your bases. We got God, but if Baal can make it rain and God isn't working, then we'll go to Baal. Whatever it takes, we need rain to get food. And so that was Baal's deal. Now, here's the thing, though. Does it rain a lot in Israel, do you think, just off the top of your head? No, most of the year it's actually like bone dry. They get all their rain kind of in one or two concentrated bursts in the year. They have rainy seasons, and then they have dry seasons. The dry seasons are about 5 times longer than the rainy seasons, which is a problem. But if Baal is the storm god and he makes it rain and it goes through months and months and months at a time without rain, does that leave you with kind of a theological problem? It actually does, because if he's the God of rain and you were sacrificing and were being obedient, why doesn't he bring rain? And so they actually worked out an explanation for this, and you're going to love this. So here's what they decided, that over the years, that over the course of the year, that Baal would actually submit to the god Mot, who was the god of the underworld, and would actually die. And so he would remain dead for a while, and then eventually you would have, let me find this guy's name. Holy cow, where is it? Anat, like you would know. A god named Anat every year would then raise him back to life, and he would come back to life, and the rains would go, and then he would die again, which is just flipping inconvenient when your God keeps dying on you, and somebody's got to go raise him up. Can we agree on that? That's inconvenient. That's okay. So just this idea that God exists, always has, always will, made everything, always there. I guess it's just too easy. And so they've got Baal living and dying, and Mot killing him, and Anat raising him, and it's just a mess. So this really sets the stage then for Elijah. Elijah's stage is set, and so he takes the stage, and literally he just barges in. As we get into 1 Kings 17, he literally just barges right into the story, because there's like no parentage. There's no, here's your hometown. He just walks in and like he picks a fight with the king. That's a good place to start. So here's Elijah taking center stage in 1 Kings chapter 17. And Elijah the Tishbite, so I guess we get a little bit of area. Tishbite, we don't even know where it is. Like scholars not a clue, or at least nothing definite. Of the inhabitants of Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand or whom I serve, there shall not be dew nor rain these, what's the next word? Years, except at my word. And so he goes up to the king and says, guess what? I serve God, and it's not going to rain again until I say so, and I'm not going to say so until he tells me to say so. So it's going to rain again when God, the one true God, the one you're walking away from, says it's going to rain. Let's see how good of a storm god Baal is. He said, because forget this cycle of living and dying and resurrection, years. Is that a big fight to pick? And that's not just a theological fight, is it? He's not just picking a fight with Elijah or with Ahab, though he is. And he's not just picking a fight with Jezebel, though he is. He's not just picking a fight with Baal, though he is. He's also picking a fight with a nation who's very dependent upon rain. But here's the problem. The hearts of the people were following Baal, not God. And so he just picked a fight with everybody. He said, it's going to rain again a couple years from now when I say it rains again. That's pretty impressive. And then we find the word of the Lord came to him saying, get away from here and turn eastward and hide by the brook Cherith, which flows into the Jordan. And it will be that you shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord, for he went and stayed by the brook Cherith, which flows into the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. And Brooke, brother. And so here's Elijah. His message is delivered. Popular message? Probably no. But it's delivered, and God says, okay, your message is delivered. You've got nothing to do for a couple years. Why don't you go hang out over here by this brook? And so he sends him actually to the east side of the Jordan River, and there are some mountain streams that feed down into the Jordan River. And so he sends him up to one of these streams, and he said, I'm going to have some ravens. They're going to stop by twice a day. They're going to give you bread and meat, which ain't bad. I mean, talk about drive-through. They're just going to fly down, drop it off, fly. God is so cool. Because, like, this doesn't happen. Like, if you ever see ravens flying around with a red and white checkered red and white checkered towel, and they just flop down, and they go, dinner, and you know it's coming from God, so calorically it can't be too bad. It's good for you. I don't know. And I'm hoping it's not like raven. Where do the ravens get the food? I don't know. Don't ask me questions like that I don't know the answer to. But God is supernaturally providing for Elijah. And so the point we see, because we need to stop here in the story, but the point we see is this, that God's people were beginning to turn from God. And definitely the leadership were already turning from God. And so God calls one of his servants and says, I need you to take an unpopular message and I need you to deliver it, and then I'll take care of you. And what we find in our day, in our culture, and we talked about it this morning, kind of been one of the themes throughout the day, is that our culture is becoming increasingly hostile to God and to his message. And yet God calls us to live and deliver a message for him, from him, to the people that's not popular, but he says, look, you go deliver the message and I'll take care of you. That's what he says to Elijah. That's what he says to his people. And that's what Elijah really says to us. So we're going to end there today. Just remember, God calls us to carry an unpopular message, but he's promised to take care of us. And we'll see it here as God supernaturally rains bread and food by raven carriers down. That's it.